Hey guys, Trevor Lowe here. Just got back from Richmond, Virginia, the first stop of the Bassmaster Northern Opens Division. Just kind of want to go through what I did during practice, how the tournament went, and just kind of share with you how I was catching them, how I found them. I didn't have the finish that I wanted. I finished in 160th out of, I believe, 225 boats. So kind of towards the back of the field, but you know, I had a good practice. I went into the tournament with a really solid game plan, and I felt that I just needed to execute, and I could finish well. But you know, sometimes you run into things where they're just uncontrollable variables, and you know, didn't have the finish that I wanted to have. But that's fishing. So to begin, during practice, you know, I focused primarily in the Chickahominy River. I knew that most of the tournaments are won out of the Chick, and so I spent the majority of my practice in there. I'd been there before in 2016, and I was pretty familiar with the area, kind of knew what I was getting to by being in that area. And this time around, I focused on, I paid attention to the tides, but the biggest thing I was concerned with was finding areas that I knew the fish would push up shallow when that tide got high. It sounds kind of counterintuitive. You know, a lot of guys are looking for that low tide when they're fishing tidal riveries, which concentrates fish into certain areas. But what I found to be the most effective bite for me was a high tide that would push fish up into that shallow grass in the backs of the creeks right off the main river, and also into the cypress trees. So I spent a lot of time doing that and looking for that in practice. So during practice, you know, like I said, I focused mainly on the Chickahominy River, looking for that high water, that high tide that would push the fish up shallow, that put them into that cover. And when I was doing that, and I did the same thing for the tournament, I was throwing just a 5-inch stick bait. This one so happens to be a Yamamoto Senko, but you know, I caught him doing this, just flipping a Senko, a stick bait on 20-pound test. I've got a 4-aught Hayabusa 959 HD extra wide gap hook, and I caught a lot of fish doing that in practice. I shook off a ton of fish doing the same thing. I'd find them in the grass and I'd flip in there. I'd go into those lily pads and I'd flip in there, and also the cypress trees. And you know, it didn't really matter to me. It didn't seem like it mattered what color I was throwing. I was catching fish. And but I so happened to be throwing, this is kind of a June buggish, a red June buggish color, and that seemed to be getting a lot of bites for me. And so in practice, like I said, these are things that I found that were working for me. Also, when that tide started to pull out, I moved towards a moving bait, you know, and obviously this thing catches fish all over the place. This is a Z-Man jackhammer chatterbait. I paired it with a Z-Man goat trailer, both in white, and throwing it on 14-pound fluorocarbon. Got my Daiwa Tatula SV reel, the Daiwa Tatula Elite rod, 7'4", crank and bladed jig rod. Threw this around the lily pads and in the shallow grass, and got a lot of bites when that current started pulling. And yeah, this was a bait that helped me key in on fish and just covering a lot of water, getting those bites when I needed to. After that, you know, like I said, when that water dropped, I spent a lot of time throwing that chatterbait. And also, the other bait that got a lot of big bites for me was just a frog. This so happens to be the Z-Man Leapfrogs. It's in white. Threw it on 65-pound braid. Most of my setups are very similar. Daiwa Tatula SV with a Daiwa Tatula Elite rod. This is the 7'4" heavy Ish Monroe frog rod. 8-to-1 gear ratio on the Tatula SV, and like I said, heavy braid. Fishing around lily pads on the main channel. Sometimes you get into some spattered dock pads in the creeks as well. But the key to this was that low tide, and when that tide comes out, or that tide starts going out, it pushes the bait fish out of those creeks, out of that shallow water, and it pushes them towards that main river or the main creek channel. And you know, I looked for areas where I found fish blowing up on shad, and I put the frog in my hand, and I got a couple of really good bites on it. During the tournament on day 2, I just had fish blow up and just completely miss the frog, and that's out of your control, and there's nothing you can do about that. I'd pick up the Senko and fire right back in for a follow-up, and they just wouldn't pick that up. So some things that are just out of your control, you can't do anything about it, and but you make the most of what you can. Finally, when that tide was low, and like I said, during the tournament we had a low tide primarily throughout the majority of the day, and so that flip and bite wasn't really turning on until later in the day, towards like the last 2.5 hours of my day during the tournament. So I had to spend a lot of time fishing low tide, and another way I was catching them was just throwing a big belly weighted swim bait. This is another Hayabusa belly hook swim bait hook, screw lock. It's a 1/8 ounce 6/0 hook, and I was throwing a big, almost 6-inch swim bait. I've got it on 20-pound test. This is my Daiwa Steez AGS rod. It's a 7/6 heavy action with a Daiwa Steez A reel in a 7-to-1 gear ratio. Got a couple bites on this. Typically when they ate this bait, it was a little bit bigger of a bite. Obviously with a big 6-inch swim bait, it's a big profile. I was targeting, main river, kind of like I guess you could call them outside turns. You'd have stumps and just old laydowns and logs that would pile up on these turns. And when that water drops down, I was finding fish positioning and holding in those areas, and so I fished those areas with that swim bait, and I caught some fish doing that. And like I said, it's just it was a tough tournament for me, but those are the things that I was able to find some fish on in practice, and the tournament just didn't go the way I wanted it to go. But you take it as a learning experience and you move on to the next one. The next one is up in Oneida in New York, Lake Oneida, and I'm super excited for that. It's going to set up exactly the way Mille Lacs fishes, which is my home body of water, and I'm super stoked to get out there, and I think we'll do really well out there. So thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions, make sure to drop it in the comments below. I'll link all this stuff that I used for the tournament for practice in the description as well. Make sure you guys go show my sponsors some love. All these products that I use are from my sponsors, and they're awesome products, so I'm sure you guys will love them too. With that, we're going to sign off, and we'll see you guys later. Thanks.